Chris Sewall here, baseball card collector, investor, dealer, in that order. Welcome everyone. Story time today from the files of Adventures in Card Dealing. Today we're going to go back to 2017. This purchase actually has two sort of unrelated, interesting aspects to it. I've mentioned the second one before on the channel just briefly, but we'll go into more details on it here. And this one has one of the more unique sort of negotiating strategies that I've ever had to implement. But I also have all the financials, which I'll share at the end. So as I mentioned, it was 2017, and I was working with Jeremy Donson, the Texas Snowman. We got in contact with someone named Eddie. I don't remember how we connected, but Eddie lived in New Orleans. I was in LA and Jeremy in Arizona at the time. Eddie had some nice stuff, although it was not enough to sort of warrant a trip out to New Orleans. But at one point I was in New Orleans for my cousin's bachelor party anyway, so I decided to swing by and meet up with Eddie and see if we could do a deal. And I don't remember exactly what he had, but he had something like some low-grade vintage sets, something like that, and we were able to work out a deal. I spent out a few $1,000s with him, and Eddie was a lifelong card guy, so we were on the same page, and he was very happy with the deal, so was I. It was, a fair deal, and we got along great, and we had very sort of similar, mindsets. A few months later, Eddie contacts us again. He says he has a unique situation. He has a neighbor, or not a neighbor, but someone who lives nearby who has a very impressive collection, a lot of value, a ton of great stuff. But the problem is that the seller, he doesn't trust anyone. He has major trust issues. He's paranoid that everyone is trying to rip him off. Eddie's been to his place a bunch of times now, and the guy's just sort of now getting comfortable with Eddie. But Eddie's not a dealer. He doesn't buy these sort of collections. So he told the guy about me and said, we had done a deal together in the past and that I was on the up and up. And the guy agreed to let me come look at the collection, assuming that Eddie was going to be in the room with us. And I, of course, said that was fine. And I assume Eddie's getting some sort of piece of the sale for brokering the deal, but I don't actually know if that was the case or not. So I said, okay, sounds good. What kind of stuff does he have? And Eddie said it was loaded, multiple tens of thousands of dollars in value. And the guy had said that he had even better stuff in his storage locker, although Eddie hadn't seen that part. But just a total mishmash. Vintage, modern, all four major sports, just all over the place, but a lot of value. He was not actually interested in selling the entire collection. He just wanted to sell a piece of it. And he said that I can pick and choose which items I wanted to buy. And this was great to hear. I mean, usually people want to sell their collection as a whole, which is fine, but it's even better when someone, lets you just sort of pick and choose the items you specifically want. Eddie again reiterated that this guy was not going to trust me. He was just going to assume that I was there to rip him off. So I said, why don't we do this? Before I fly out there, why don't we come to an agreement on, one item that we agree on the price, and, that way we'll sort of establish that we can be on the same page with the price of certain items. And Eddie really liked this idea. We agreed on a 1970 Topps baseball complete set in EX condition. I told Eddie, assuming it was a solid EX, I could pay $1,000. And I didn't speak to the guy directly, just discussed this through Eddie. And after Eddie talked to the guy, he got back to me and said that was a deal. It was fine with the price. He warned me that he had not seen the set himself. He was just taking the guy's word. But, okay, great. So I agreed to fly out. I flew in on a Thursday morning, and the plan was I was going to go through the cards all day Thursday. We'd agree on a price, and then I was going to pull out the money the next day, Friday morning, and pay him on Friday, and then fly out Friday night. And this was understood and agreed to by all parties up front. Jeremy was not going to be coming, but he was going to be available by phone, and he deposited more than enough money into my account beforehand just to be on the safe side, since we really didn't have a good sense for what the total amount was going to be. I arrive, I go over to Eddie's house, and we drive to the guy's house together. And again, in the car, Eddie reiterates to me that this guy is just not going to trust you. You have to do whatever you can to sort of establish trust early. We arrive, and the guy's place is not so much messy, but just very, very cluttered. Like, there's cards everywhere. There's cards on every tabletop. Every shelf has cards on it. There's piles of cards on the floor, but there's no bulk junk. Everything has some decent value, like Eddie said. And he's actually extremely friendly at first when we first arrive, and we do sort of our hellos and our nice to meet yous. I look through a few items, and it's basically all stuff that I would buy. And he asked me what I'm interested in. I say basically everything. So I say, why don't we start with something you would like to sell, like whatever. You pick the first item. I sort of thought that this was a nice gesture, but it ended up backfiring. He hands me a box of cards and says, what would you pay for the box? And I look through it, and it's basically all like 1990s inserts, but not particularly good ones. And I could just tell, and this is sort of like an instinct thing you get when you when you've seen enough collections and met enough collectors, I could just tell that he was going to be way overvaluing the box. It was, a lot of like dollar cards that would have, a $10 price sticker on it, that type of thing. And I don't remember exactly what was in there, but I remember that, it was a box that I decided I would pay $100 for. And I could just tell in my mind that he was going to be valuing it many, many times that. So this made me a little uncomfortable. I asked him, what would you like for the box? And he said, no, I want you to throw out the first number. I wasn't quite sure what to do because I really wanted the first item to be a success. I wanted to show that we could come to a price and establish some trust and get the ball rolling. But I also didn't want to overpay and establish that, I pay higher than fair for items. So I decided to say, you know what, instead of doing this box first, why don't we start with the 1970 top set that we had agreed to on the phone? And he looks over at Eddie, and I could tell he thought I was like trying something tricky, but I don't know. But he says, okay, and he hands me the 1970 top set. I start looking through it, and it's just not EX condition. It's significantly less. It's more like VG. We had agreed on 1,000, but it's really not even worth 1,000 in its condition. And so I tell him exactly this. I say, we had agreed on 1,000, assuming it was EX, but it's really less than EX significantly. It's more like VG. I just can't pay $1,000. And he says, well, we agreed on $1,000. I'm not taking any less than that. I look over to Eddie for some support. I mean, I know Eddie knows that I'm right. Maybe he'll back me up, but he doesn't. He just sort of sits there and acts like he doesn't know. So I started thinking to myself, this just isn't going to work. And I say, I'm sorry, I just can't pay $1,000 for this set. I'd be losing money at that price. And I suggest maybe let's try another item. And I pull out a box of 2002 Topps Chrome basketball refractors. It was not a complete set or anything, but it was a nice lot. It had a Jordan and some other major stars. I don't remember exactly. But I went through it and I calculated that it was worth about $800. And normally that was something I would pay about $500 for, but I figured I needed to offer strong if there was any chance here, so I actually offered $600. He responded immediately, no, that's way too low. And I said, well, I think it's worth about $800. I can show you some recent sales if you would like, and that's why I can pay you $600. And he again said, no, that's just way too low. No way I would take that. He was not interested in seeing any online comps, and he was clearly not an online guy, very, very old school. Chances are he didn't own a computer, and maybe he didn't even own a cell phone. So I said, okay, well, how much do you want for it? And he said, well, a lot more than 600. So I asked again, well, how much? And he would not give me an answer other than just a lot more than 600. So I'm about to say, I don't think it makes sense to continue here. We're just too far off on everything. And Eddie sort of sees this, and before I say it, he jumps in and he says, hey, Chris, let me talk to you outside for a second. And I say, okay, sure. And he asks the guy, hey, is that okay? And the guy says, yeah. And so Eddie and I step outside. And outside, Eddie says to me, Chris, you're reading this situation all wrong. First of all, you got to pay the $1,000 on the 1970 top set. And I say, well, yeah, but the set's VG. I mean, it's not even worth $1,000. I'm going to be losing money. And he says, it doesn't matter. You got to pay the $1,000 on that set if you want any chance of buying anything else. And I say, well, I don't think I want to buy anything else. I mean, his prices are too high. I mean, I offered pretty strong on that Topps Chrome refractor lot, and he said I was way too low. Either he's overvaluing his stuff, or maybe he doesn't understand that I need some room to make a profit. And Eddie said, Chris, he understands the profit thing, trust me, but he has no idea what his stuff is worth, none whatsoever. He doesn't follow the market. He doesn't remember what he paid for this stuff since it was so long ago. He's not connected to any card people whatsoever. He really has no idea. On that refractor set, it didn't matter what you offered him. He was just going to say, he was just assuming you were trying to rip him off regardless of what you said. What you need to do is you need to go back in there, pay the $1,000 for the 1970 set, weigh up your offer on the refractor lot, even if it means you're overpaying, and then moving forward, just offer super low on stuff. And then he'll say no, and then you can negotiate up to whatever you think is actually the fair price for you to be paying. For that refractor lot, you should have offered, $100 or $200, and he would have said the exact same thing. No, that's way too low. And then you would have come way up to $500 or $600, whatever you think was the fair price to pay. And then he would have felt like he's negotiating you up, and he would have been more comfortable with the end price. And he would have felt like he's getting a fair price, which he is. I remember thinking, it seems kind of shady and manipulative, but Eddie says, Chris, he really needs to sell. He really needs the money, but he does not trust you. He thinks you're ripping him off. If you negotiate this way, you'll be able to pay, ultimately a fair price, and that's best for everyone. So I say, okay, and I basically do exactly that. I go back in and I agree on the $1,000 for the 1970 top set. I then up my offer on the refractor lot from 600 to 800, and I eventually get up to 1,000, which he agrees to on that. I'm now pretty far in the hole on these first two items, but I then implement, Eddie's lowball strategy. At each item, I would just lowball him with my opening offer, and he would always say the same thing: no, that's way too low. And then we would negotiate up to more or less the price that I thought was fair for me to be paying. And basically, he just needed to feel that he was in control of things. We did this with a bunch of items, and after a while, he started getting more and more comfortable with me, seeing that I was paying 2 or 3 times my opening offer. So he actually stopped negotiating as we were getting to maybe the 10th item or so, and he would just sort of accept my offer. So I basically stopped lowballing him at some point and just offered fair at the jump, and he would just accept it. It was a very weird experience for sure, but in the end we had agreed on over $10,000 worth of cards for me to buy. Other than those first 2 items, which I overpaid for, basically everything else was more or less fair. When I think back on it, what's really funny to me is that in order for me to establish trust, I had to offer too low, as opposed to the standard. In order to establish trust, you need to be offering strong or offer too strong even sometimes. Just funny that it was sort of the reverse. But we shook hands. We agreed that I'd be back the next day with the cash. We left, and I went over to my hotel room. So that was the first part of the story, just unique negotiating strategy. But there was a plot twist when it came to getting the money. I called Jeremy and told him the news, but he had already deposited plenty of money into my account by then. So we were, good to go. I was going to get up in the morning, go over to the bank, and pull out the cash and head over to the guy's house. But right before I went to sleep, I decided to look up bank locations. I used Bank of America, and usually they open at 8:30 or 9, and the plan was to be back at the guy's place around 10. But when I looked it up, I realized something that I had not considered. There were no Bank of Americas in Louisiana. I remember, thinking, well, that can't be right. This is Bank of America. But that was indeed the case. They also did not operate in Mississippi nor Alabama, which were the 2 closest states. They did have branches in Texas, but that was 4.5 hours to the border. The closest Bank of America was in Pensacola, Florida, about 3.5 hours drive away. I called Jeremy and we tried to figure out if there's another way, for him to get me the money. And I don't remember if we considered like a Western Union type wire type of thing, but for whatever reason, we could not come up with a solution. The only thing for me to do was to get up real early and drive to Florida, and this is what I did. I woke up at 5 a.m., hit the road at 5:30, and crossed into Florida around 9 a.m. just as the bank was opening. I called Eddie and asked if he could tell the guy we're going to be there around 1 p.m. as opposed to 10 a.m. This made Eddie a little nervous since the guy was so untrusting, but there was no other option. I pulled out the money and headed back and got back to the guy's place around 1. And luckily, changing the time ultimately didn't affect the transaction in any way. I paid him, and he gave me the cards, and we shook hands, and everything was great. But now I was in a bit of a rush as I had to get to the FedEx store before my flight. I had to ship everything out back to my LA home as it was too bulky to take onto the plane. But I managed to get that done, and in the end, everything worked out. In the end, the deal was nothing spectacular, but it was okay. Here is the breakdown. We spent $10,200 on the cards. My flight, car rental, and hotel came to a total of $830. That included the gas, which was a bigger expense than anticipated. Also spent $175 to ship the cards back to me in LA. Total cost was $11,205. Sales looked like this. These numbers are after fees are accounted for and rounded to the nearest hundred. Month 1, we sold $1,800. Month 2, $3,000. Month 3, $2,600, and so on. Jeremy recouped his initial investment during month 5. The total money in was $15,100, and I would estimate I put in a week of full-time work on top of the 2-day trip, although that's just a guess. So a total profit of a little under $4,000. Jeremy and I split that. We each pocketed close to $2,000. Neither of us kept any cards from this deal. It just wasn't cards that we were interested in keeping. But if you look at each of us individually, Jeremy made $2,000 on an $11,000 investment, and I made $2,000 for, we'll call it 7 days of full-time work. So that's it for this installment of Adventures in Card Dealing. Hope you enjoyed. Really interested to hear what people thought in the comments of the negotiation. Like, did you think that was shady of me in any way for, technically I was being disingenuous by by offering, lowballing my offers. But, that was the only way to get anything done. And in the end, basically paid fair. Does the end justify the means? I definitely didn't feel great about it, but I guess it's sort of like a gray area. But anyway, let me know what you thought of it, and really appreciate everyone watching, and see you again next time. Thanks, everyone.